Welcome everyone to I think the last slot today before we go into the after event. The talk is about the Ceph ADM and how to troubleshoot an installation. So one question: how many of you are running a Ceph ADM installation? Ceph Ansible? Yeah. Okay. So let's see. Okay. About me, my name is Michel. I'm working as a cloud solutions architect for the B1 Systems. It's a German company. It's located near Ingolstadt. 140 people. We're doing consultancy, training, support for almost a lot of open source products, like Ceph, like OpenStack, and this talk is about how we get details out of the cluster, out of the deployment, and let's start with something that is obvious. So please don't get me wrong, Ceph ADM is great. It's a quantum leap compared to Ceph deploy, for example, or Ceph Ansible. As you already said, it takes a long time to run over hundreds of clusters. There's a lot of improvements over the last versions. So if I remember correct, the first version of Ceph ADM was you can deploy the cluster. The latest version is you can deploy a cluster, you can deploy iSCSI, NFS. Rather great way, you have the dashboard and all the stuff. So it's really cool. This talk is not about the pro and con of container installation. There's sometimes you see a discussion on the mailing list if it's correct, or is it the best way to use a containerized installation, or is it the future, or whatever. That's not about. It's only about how to get log files out of the cluster and what's the best way to monitor your deployment. What parameters are there, what provokes an error, and all the stuff. So what's the problem? I've learned today that that's not a problem, it's a challenge. So there she. So we need to accept the challenge. So a few words about the Ceph ADM. As we all know, deployment is fully automated, which is cool and sometimes annoying because it is quiet. Or have you seen some output? If you try to start a new daemon, it only says scheduled, monitor scheduled, manager scheduled. That's perfect, but I want to know what's going on. And there are many places where you can configure things like the config DB, like the spec files, which is cool. But on my perspective, I'm missing some more output, default output. What's going on? Where's the problem? What command runs on which host and all the stuff. Compared to Ceph Ansible, so you can choose what you want. Nothing or a small amount of information is scheduled, or 10 minutes of output running this task on this host. Okay, next host, next host, next host, and after 20 minutes you're done. It's up to you. The problem is, or that's why I'm talking about this. Troubleshooting can be hard. So there was a lot of people who running Ceph ADM installations. Have you ever incurred an error that you were not able to manage? Yes. And what was the solution? Debugging? Purge the cluster? Oh yeah, okay. Purge the cluster, for example, that's good. I have one customer who has a multi-stage environment, 4 clusters in the first stage, 4 clusters in the second, and 8 clusters in the productive. And they have their policy. If something goes wrong, they don't debug the problem. They throw the whole cluster away and deploy the next one. That's the same stack already, so OpenStack, OpenShift, and all the stack that runs above the cluster owner in the stage. So, yeah, that's also very interesting policy. A few words about Ceph ADM. if you have ever looked into the code, you will see that the, let's say, old code with more than 1,000 lines of code for the Ceph ADM, there's a hard implemented or hard coded way to connect to the next host or to a host in general. That's done over a Python class, async SSH, and as you can see, that's the problem or the connection with some parameters and all the stuff. But there's no way how you can intercept this command. There's no option on see what actually runs on the host. So that's one problem. The other problem is, or at least for someone maybe, the default user is stick to root. So if you are in a lucky position that it doesn't matter that you run the deployment with root, that's good. But sometimes I have a customer where we are not allowed to run commands or installation with root users. So, first versions of Ceph ADM, yeah, next try. We stick to Ceph Ansible. That's okay. We don't upgrade. Next version. Oh, we have a Ceph. We have a dedicated user that we can specify. Okay, that's good. Let's try it. Okay. Then the next thing is we have the tool Ceph ADM and of course the orchestrator backend Ceph ADM. So two things with the same name. That can be for a beginner confusing, let's say. And there's a few ways. It depends on how you count. 5 ways to collect data from your cluster. The first one is every time you deploy a service, you have a spec file. And if you run the orchestrator ls command with the corresponding manager or daemon you want to see, paired with the output format and the YAML, you see in the last line events. And let's see if I can scroll it. Was created. Hey, cool. But what if the service is not starting? It's still created. That's, yeah, it is a problem. If you're lucky in a bad situation, it's up to you. If there are some error messages where you can see the problem, it's good for you. But sometimes the container doesn't start. I don't know why. Next option is that we have the Ceph tool itself. We have the possibility to specify the watch channel, -W, capital W, Ceph ADM, and then you see the Ceph output, the Ceph ADM output from the cluster, from the manager, from the active manager where it runs the orchestrator backend. That's the output. Problem is, that's more or less the same output as you see in the slide before, created or scheduled. For OSD, it's very interesting. It's scheduled. OSD creating is scheduled or something like that. And that's it. That output comes direct from the backend, from the manager, from the orchestrator backend. Then as another option, we have, of course, the Ceph tool, the Ceph CLI, log last, followed by the Ceph ADM tool, or a command, or a channel, and then we have the same output. So 3 ways with the same output. It's cool. Useful? It depends. Yeah, same output as I said. Then we have the Ceph ADM followed log. So I mean the tool where you bootstrap the cluster. Ceph ADM CLI provides a log subcommand followed by the name of the manager or the daemon you want to see. This is only valid for local installations. So if you for local daemons, if you don't have the Ceph ADM tool installed on an OSD host, next try. Then you should use the journal command, because the Ceph ADM logs minus name and so on is only creating or starting the journal control with the parameter for you, and you only have to take care about the name. In this case, manager.ceph.1 some UID, some string. or you just run the Ceph control tool, which is more powerful in my opinion, because you can specify a since, a from, and a reverse, and all the stuff. Then, of course, we have the option to create log files. The default option is false, so you don't see log files and the var log ceph UID and then the name. If you want to have log files, you have to set a parameter to true. The first one creates service log files for each service, for manager, for mon, for OSDs, for every service you spawn in the cluster. The second parameter creates a cluster-wide log file and the ordered log file. It's very helpful if you have a big cluster or multiple clusters and you want to collect the files over FileBeat, for example, into a centralized logging system. Then you want to turn it on. That's all helpful to get information, but there's one thing missing. The log level. The default log level is 1 for the log file. The memory is stick to 5 per default, but that's not helpful. 1 means nothing. Service created, scheduled. If you really want to see what's going on, you have to stick at least at 5 or more. You can go with 10 and 20 and all the stuff, but that's not really helpful. 5 is the minimum where you can see what's really going on. There's a log message connected to the host, deployed, and that's it. So no SH command, nothing. So with 5, it's getting interesting, let's say. That's all the stuff that comes with the default Ceph installation, or you can configure in the Ceph installation. There are some other ways. If you want to see more, if you want to see the SHA command, or the container calls itself. So if you, for example, Ceph ADM, if you deploy this, if you deploy OSDs, it spins up a container and creates all the stuff, logical volumes, PVs, and all the stuff inside the container. You will only see, if you some slides in the future, you will see that it only creates a container, and you see the command which runs inventory or created in batch or whatever it is for the OSDs. But I can say what is not working to start with that. If you go on the internet and look for tools or specific shells where you can log the SHA command, I think the first or second Google try is this SSH option, force command. It's an option on the daemon itself. It means every login uses this command to run the shell, to bash. Problem is, if you have a wrong logging shell or a bad script, then you get an exit 1 with non-interactive shells. And that's important. Normally they only log, or the examples on the internet only log interactive shells, typically over the script tool, and then you can script replay and see what's going on in the session. In non-interactive shells, exit 1 and that's it. So force command for the SSH isn't working really good. If you have a good one, maybe, but I don't find one on the internet, and I was not able to write one in the time. The second one is AutoD. Who knows AutoD? So 1, 2, 3, okay. In short, it spams the log files. It writes every command, every process, everything that goes on the server is written to the log, which is good because it's auditing the system, and you can review the system, what's going on. Problem is, with the default configuration, it will not work. It will not log the SH8 command, which is done by the Ceph ADM tool. Maybe with some work, and you see already there's a little star. So let's wait. Then, if you Google for how to log commands that are running on a Linux host, you also find an bash option. export prompt command on the bash SC as the last command. It's good, it's working for interactive shells. And then you get some output like the root user is on date with the exit code 0, and that's good, but it will not work for the Ceph ADM tool. So now we know what's not working. Let's see what is working. Scoopy. Have you ever heard Scoopy?
Snoopy or
Snoopy, you're right. Snoopy, thanks. Snoopy. Snoopy, Norman? It's a really simple tool. It's part of the Ubuntu repository, for example. You can install it, start it, and then every command that is done over SHA or local shells, it's logged. And also non-interactive shells. And then we get an output like this one. This one is from, I think it's Ceph ADM OSD refresh or host device refresh, something like that. It's a Ceph ADM command which you can run to see all the OSDs, all the devices that you have inside the cluster. And this is the corresponding command that runs on an OSD host, for example, or on all hosts which are part of the cluster. So the first glimpse of what's going on inside a host. Otherwise you only see, or it's scheduled to refresh. And now we see, okay, there's the containers fired up with the Ceph volume tool, inventory, and the output is JSON. Okay, it's okay. But it's getting better. With the oddity, with some work. There are 2 lines required to get this up and running. This one, you have to enable the logging for all the users and disable the logging for all the users, otherwise this won't work really good. And the second line is nowadays standard. So mainly you have to add the first line and then restart the oddity. And if you using a different user than root for the Ceph ADM, these 2 lines are important because they said also log the change. If you log in with the user and then type a sudo into the root, then it's these 2 lines are required to log also the sudo commands. And with this one, come on, we're getting a lot of more information what's going on. This one is the same command as with Snoopy, but with a lot of shiny stuff around. Oh, I'm scrolling in the wrong window, sorry. Here, Ceph volume tool, and with a lot of parameters. Where's the inventory format JSON pretty filter for batch. So it is the same command as before with Snoopy, but with a lot of information around. The cool thing about the audit tool is you can also see what is going on inside the container. So this one fires up a container, and afterwards you will find log files, lines of what is going on inside the container. What does Ceph ADM do? It will scan all the devices. It will do a dump 2fs minus a and all the stuff. So with the audit D, with the correct configuration, you can see what is your Ceph ADM installation really doing. What is the container doing? So if you're stuck, that's, I think from now that's the best way to debug installation. So with that, what can we now do? First thing, requirements. I know that's standard, but as a consultant, I see a lot of stuff that is not done in the requirements. So updates, correct Python installation. Is Python installed? The correct container configuration, Podman, Docker is the registry set and all the stuff. Network, firewall is the simplest tool, DNS. If the DNS is not working correctly, you cannot add hosts. You get in strange error messages from the Ceph ADM when trying to add a host, because they don't find the host or cannot connect to host because it gets a different IP address, because the DNS says, hey, that's the management IP address and it's not available on this host and all the stuff. NTP, I know today, or Nowadays, NTP should no problem, but NTP. If you're at that point and everything looks okay, try to pull the image manually. Maybe you have a typo in the container image that you specified, or the default that comes with the Ceph ADM is a pre-configured container image, which pointed to Quay IO and all the stuff. Try to pull the container on the specific host that will not work. If that's work, okay, try to start the container manually. With Snoopy or the D, you know the parameters. First shot should be without the parameters, and second one with parameters. If that's also working, then it can only be on the Ceph afterwards. If the container starts, then you should check the log files. Is the placement okay? So I mean the spec, the YAML spec that you have to specify where the daemon runs. -- placement, then host, or you can specify the placement over a YAML file. Is the OSD filter okay? There was a change in the Ceph ADM spec where you can specify the type of the OSD, the size. So for the DB or for the data device from 1 terabyte to 4 terabyte, and the DB device or write-ahead log from 900 to 1 terabyte. There was a change, and I don't know, I cannot remember which version it was, but you can check it with the refresh command or the dry run. That was the correct one, the dry run. If it looks okay, then it should be something in the container. Maybe, as I said, the Ceph volume command does a lot of things before they start formatting the Blue Store device. Check that one if it's not working. Ceph ADM versus system CTL. Don't let fight both against. That will not work. So if you have your script which creates the cluster over Ansible, for example, and you restart the monitoring stack, Grafana, Prometheus, over systemctl, it is just a matter of time where the Ceph ADM provides an error message like, Grafana is not working. And it's stuck. Decide if you want to restart a container, Ceph ADM or systemctl. Otherwise, you get the error message from the systemctl sometimes, restarted too quickly. And the speaker before said, automate everything. Avoid automation. With Ceph ADM, so you guys that are still running Ceph ADM, are there plans to switch to Ceph ADM, Ceph Ansible, and to switch to Ceph ADM? Yes? Okay. Have fun. I had a customer who has exactly the same problem. He runs the Red Hat Ceph storage version 4. Whatever and wants to upgrade to 5. Problem was, everything is done over Ansible, even with version 5. There's no script, no tool available right now to set up a whole cluster with Ansible over the Ceph ADM, so everything needs to be done over the scratch or from scratch. And the problem where at the beginning we had to use the Ansible tower, so root user not allowed. Okay, first one. Second one, we have to create Ansible scripts for creating spec files to start the Ceph ADM with the corresponding spec files. Okay, that's okay. Then we have to create custom Grafana configurations because in Pacific or in version 5.1.2, it was not allowed to monitor to reconfigure Grafana. Let's say, for example, the LDAP integration in Grafana. There's no way. You have to place your own Grafana configuration inside the container and then restart the container. Restart was done over systemctl. Oops. The Ceph ADM said, okay, there was an error with one daemon because Grafana was restarted outside. So let's avoid automation like this one, like Ansible doing the job of Ceph ADM, and Ceph ADM is configuring the cluster. Stick to Ceph ADM and you'll be happy, almost. That's something I can only tell. Okay, yeah, and with that, that's all. I thank you. So, and there are questions.
Is confdb really supported?
Yeah, with confdb I mean the Ceph config set tool.
So it's a manual command.
Yeah, so not the config.db itself, so the Ceph config tool. Ceph config set manager global or whatever.
How do you keep track of the changes in a repository or pull request?
Pull requests.
Yeah, so if you are in a team and you want to make
Wait, I was there was something.
with Ansible, for example, people got used to pull requests, reviews, and all that stuff.
So, okay, yeah, no.
And that was a way to validate possible issues or stuff like that. And all right, you move to Ceph ADM. What do you do now?
The next one, please. Yeah, there's no. So as of now, I don't know. The only
I know. I'm a Ceph ADM user as well.
Okay, so the only option I would say is to monitor the spec files, or to commit and approve the spec files, because the spec files are more or less they are reliable. So if you have a cluster and inject the spec files into it, it works. So that's the only option, I would say.
I would like to add just to this question that we kind of solved this issue by dumping all the configurations from Ceph config to the file and commit it to a single Git repository. So if something is changed, we can at least know when it was changed, and it will, we hope that in some emergency situation it will give us some clues how to or what changed, but that's not the solution to the original question.
Yeah, you're right as well. I'm also thinking, what's about the Grafana Prometheus configuration? That's or custom configuration. So
yeah, we don't use that.
Yeah. Okay. That's okay. But thanks. So, any other questions? Otherwise, I would say thank you. Thank you.